Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Some of you are already introducing yourselves in the chat. Thank you so much. It's great to see you here. So welcome to our session today, Cultivating a STEM Mindset in Young Children. So the image you see here with the two children exploring Mars, they're showing actually an activity that we'll be doing later in the session today. My name is Philippa Rappaport. I'm the lead for education and engagement at the Smithsonian Office of Educational Technology, which is the central education office at the Smithsonian and the office behind the Smithsonian Learning Lab. I'm joined today by Ann Caspari. She is an early childhood education specialist at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, and also by Tess Porter, excuse me, who's a user experience strategist at the Smithsonian Office of Educational Technology. And Tess will be helping us behind the scenes today. In our session, Anne will talk about techniques to help young children develop science skills and cultivate a STEM mindset. Young children are capable of using scientific practices and understanding science, technology, engineering, and math concepts when given opportunities to practice these skills with the support of adult companions. So Anne will demonstrate questioning, close looking, model making, and dramatic play techniques to help children make personal connections to the content that they're examining and to help them apply their developing theories. You'll leave the session today with digital resources for your early childhood classrooms and strategies to develop lasting STEM skills. Toward the end of the session, we'll try out an activity with Anne. Hopefully you have access to a paper bag and scissors for that part of the program. Anne is a long-time revered educator at the Smithsonian. She began working here about 25 years ago in the nationally recognized Smithsonian Early Enrichment Center, which is a preschool program that focuses on using museums and community resources to enrich the lives of young children and provide a positive foundation for lifelong learning experiences. From there, she took her talent and imagination to the National Air and Space Museum, and I'm just so pleased that Anne is here today to talk about techniques and strategies that she's honed really over several decades. So hopefully you are all familiar with Zoom by now after a long pandemic. But this is an interactive session. We'd love to hear from you. Please do share your ideas and comments in the chat, and we'll monitor the chat throughout. Make sure you tag it so that your comments are visible to everyone, not just the hosts and panelists. And if you have any questions at any time, you can enter them in the Q&A, and we'll answer those questions at the end. I see you're all introducing yourselves. If you're new to the Learning Lab, it's an online platform, free, where you can discover digital museum resources from across the Smithsonian and beyond, and create interactive learning experiences with them. We'll be sharing resources today from the lab, and any links that we're sharing can be found in the Learning Lab collection that is linked in the description of the video. And we'll also walk you through that collection at the end of our session today. This is an image of our help center, our help page that you can access from any page that you're on in the Learning Lab by clicking the Get Started link at the bottom. On this page, you can find step-by-step instructions to discover, create, and share digital museum content from the lab. We have access to our YouTube videos to guide you through everything you might want to do in the lab. And if you were to click here at the top where it says webinars and events, that would take you to our events page where you can access our archived programs. And today's program will be added to that within about 24 hours. Well, so that goes to say our program will be recorded and then added to the events page. Okay, so we'd like to start off with a question, and I'll turn it over to Anne. But the two questions we'd love for you to answer in the chat are, what does a STEM mindset mean to you? And how do you cultivate STEM learning in your learning environment? And I'll turn it over to Anne.
Thanks, Philippa. I'm really so happy to be here with you. And I see so many people that have been introducing themselves are at STEM schools or in, places where they have STEM environments. So although we cannot, see you in this webinar, kind of Zoom webinar, we can hear from you in the chat. So we'd love to hear from you. What do you think a STEM mindset means? And then what are some ways that you cultivate a STEM mindset in your young learners? So we already have an idea about a questioning mindset. Definitely that's something that I think about, like when you're, going out with children out in the world, or when you're playing with things in the classroom, having this kind of idea of looking and thinking about what are their questions, and developing questions and not necessarily answering questions right away, right? That's a really important part of a STEM mindset. And then I see some people talking about seeing the value in STEM, and the idea of again, STEM being this kind of idea of not just science by itself, but like the combination of science, technology, engineering, and math all together, that they kind of like have a kismet where when you're learning them together, they really work together. So sort of recognizing those ideas and seeing that. So that's a great a connection to think about. Encouraging curiosity in young children, definitely. And saying like it's okay if we failing forward, failing to succeed, seeing those error situations, and those times when you're like just testing things out and messing around, those are great learning opportunities. So those are great things, ideas that you can make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. So I love all of these great ideas that people are putting in the chat. I certainly definitely can't keep up with every single one of them because they're coming in fast, which is fantastic. I love it. Ideas about having kids have an opportunity to have a makerspace, or having that like available materials where they can put them together in their own way, and put their own ideas. That's fabulous, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy doing in my own programs that I that we do in the museum. At the National Air and Space Museum, I'm an early childhood education specialist, and so I work with my colleague Diane Kidd, and we develop programming for kids from infants to 8 years old. That's our range, and so that's how we define young learners in this case. So thinking about that as being young learners, although we can be young for a long time. Um, and we particularly look at preschool through second grade classes, as well as working with families and children and their families together. So we have lots of great ideas about building something that's sustainable and has utility outside. So that's kind of an engineering idea of like thinking about how we can solve problems in the world, or solve problems that we encounter, and thinking about ways that you can make your own environment better through engineering. So I love that as another way of thinking about STEM mindset. So I can see this topic is one that many, many people are really interested in, and I'm so happy to see that that we have so many people that are really interested to think more about this together. And I'd love to have your ideas coming in as we're thinking about that. So I'm going to talk a little bit now as well about, and you can keep putting your ideas in the chat, and we'll have those, be able to look back at them as well. Go through a little bit about what we're going to do in this session today. And the next slide. Basically today, we're going to talk first about what a STEM mindset is, which we started to do a little bit already. And then we're going to go through a few strategies that I like to use, that we like to use at the Air and Space Museum, as ways to cultivate a STEM mindset. And these are by no means all of the strategies, but we just had to select a few since we don't have, all the time in the world to be with you today. But they are looking closely and wondering, thinking about story and narrative and how stories can help us to connect young children to the science and technology, engineering and math. And then imaginative play. And at the end, we're going to be thinking about together how you can put these ideas into practice in your learning environments, whatever they are. And I see we have a very wide range of learning environments represented here with the folks that are out there. So so that'll be really fun to think about that. And our session objectives, as we mentioned, we hope that you'll come away from this session being able to describe a little bit more fully what a STEM mindset is and why it is important to young learners. And then thinking about a few specific strategies that we can use to cultivate STEM thinking, those ones that we mentioned already. And then we'll share our digital resources that we have developed at the Smithsonian, and show you how you can find those on our site, so that it's easy for you to find those resources and use them tomorrow, any day in your learning environments, so they can get our kids thinking about thinking like a scientist or an engineer. So, as Philippa said, I've been working at the Smithsonian for, quite a long time now, and at the Air and Space Museum for about 15 years. And when I first came to to the Air and Space Museum, um, it was a lot of people were saying like STEM was, maybe fourth grade. We really didn't do a lot of work with really serious STEM in the early childhood years. And they said like young children really can't grasp the ideas of science and the concepts of science. And that's really changed in the last 15 years. So it's amazing to see now how much growth there has been in both research and practice of teaching STEM for young children. So wonderful to know. And I know when I first started at the Air and Space Museum, I really tried to like delve into, what were people talking about and what was the research. And sometime along those years, back in the mid 2000s, the National Science Teacher Association and the National Association for the Education of Young Children, or NSTA and NAEYC, as we love to use acronyms, worked together to put together a position statement on early childhood science, affirming to teachers, administrators, everybody out there that yes, young children were capable and had the capacity and propensity to develop science skills and practices, as well as understand science and engineering disciplinary ideas. So they could develop these basic abilities for science learning as young children. That would be then, the basis and the start of what they would continue their whole lives. And that it is important to develop these ideas early. One of the reasons that it's important is that young children are often, if they don't see themselves as scientists and they don't see themselves as engineering focused people, then they don't continue to pursue it later. So if they kind of are feeling like, oh, science is not for me, I'm not a science type person, then later on they're going to be like, I'm tuning out to that. So it's super important to start young with, pretty much I think all of the topics, all of the things, explore and expand our ideas. But science is definitely one of those. And young children have so many of the propensities already to be science, have a STEM mindset in that they're curious, they're questioning, they love to explore and experiment in the world and get hands-on. And so just with a guide, a helpful adult that's with them, they can really build on those ideas, and the adults can be there to support and scaffold the learning in a wonderful way. Of course, they can also be there to block it, and to stop them. So we want to make sure that we're the kind of guide that's there to say, like, yes, let's find out together. Let's think about that together. I wonder, interesting question, and that sort of thing, rather than being like, ugh, you're asking so many questions. It's really annoying me. So hopefully, I know none of you out there do that, but once in a while, maybe if we are a little tired. So yeah, so thinking a little bit about how we have developed these ideas with different organizations, and also thinking about even the next generation science standards, which looks at science practices, these uh you know these concepts, that kind of cross-cutting concepts, as well as the disciplinary core ideas, and saying, these are all three parts are super important. And in fact, understanding the science practices and getting some experience with science practices, as well as the cross-cutting concepts, which are things um, like patterns, building models, things like that. So those are all things that are in a way more important than learning the ideas, the concepts. Those ideas and concepts develop over time, and we're certainly not going to pour the ideas into the kids' heads and have them rote learning and send them back to us. So yeah, that's a little bit about sort of the research research and thought that has developed since I've come into the field, in STEM learning for young children. So we can keep thinking together about what a STEM mindset is. And one of those things I think a lot of you said was questioning, wondering, curiosity. And one of the ways that we really like, of course, we are museum people. So what we work with is objects. And we have a great collection of objects at the museum. And so one of the things that we love to do is look closely at objects, take a slow down a little bit, and then, start to think about, well, what are our questions about this thing? What is that, what are we wondering? So we're going to take a moment now to look closely and think about this object. And I have a picture in the next slide that is a little bigger. So you can see the same object in just a little bit bigger. So we can look a little bit more closely than the last one. So what I like to do when I'm looking closely is to really look at all parts of the image. So I might look, at the very top of the image and think about what I'm seeing there. And if I have any ideas and thoughts about that. And then look all the way down to the bottom of the image and look at what I see there and what I'm noticing. And I like to look all the way to the right of the image and see what I see there, and to the left. And this image might be a little you might have questions about the image itself as opposed to the object that it is. And maybe some of you already know what this object is, but maybe you have some ideas about it. So you might have questions or comments, and you can put those right in the chat right now. What are some things that you observe that you're noticing? You can think about that as an adult person looking at this, and then you can also think about, what do you think young children looking at this might think about, and what might think people might wonder or notice. So we have some ideas. Somebody says is it a rover? Somebody says that there's a lot of text on one side. Over on the front of it, this is because that's a really good observation, because this is the object in the museum. So it's in the context of a museum and not in its context of where it would be normally used. And so that's kind of gives it a little bit different idea about it. You can think about you might think about how you could replicate a similar thing with Legos or another material. And that's a great idea. Like making a model of something is a great way to understand it and to think a lot about it. And when you have a small model of something that's larger, because this is like a pretty big object, it helps you to, to understand it a little bit better. You can hold it in your hand. And so that's another way, like, to think about comparing it with something that that you might know already. It definitely has wheels on the bottom. We see wheels, and it has, like, so looking at it, like comparing it to a car, which might be something that we usually think about that has wheels. A car usually has four wheels, and this one has, I don't know, one, two, three that I see, and then I'm guessing, three on the other side. Um, so so this is like, looking at how it's put together and what are the component parts of it. As somebody said, is it a camera? And So that's a great question. A lot of good questions. We have another image of the same object. And I will show you that right now. So this is another image of that same object, but it's still in the museum and not in its normal, like what you would use it for, but it is in a context where you might be able to, like, the text is not there. That also might help you to, like, see different things about it. And so, like, if you have different images of the same object, sometimes that's helpful to notice that, different things about it. So yeah, this is definitely, you notice that the wheels look like they're very rugged. They might be able to go on different kinds of terrain, like sand. There is a camera up here. Definitely this has a camera on it. You can kind of see where the camera would be on the top of it. And there's something like a orange colored, maybe a hexagonal shape. That's like, what could that be? What do you think that might be? So now some of you have already guessed and have an idea of what this is. And of course, me coming from the National Air and Space Museum might give you a hint that this is something to do with air and space. So this is a Mars rover. This is the test model that they used for the Curiosity rover. So this rover is one that was sent to, this particular one did not go to Mars, but this is a test model that is very similar to the actual one that went to Mars, and they used it to test out in terrain that was similar to Mars out in the desert, so that they could see how it would work once it, make sure that it worked well. And that's oftentimes at the Air and Space Museum, we get test models so that they are a little bit better than just a model. They're like really built objects that can help us to understand the real thing that we will never get to see, because it's staying on Mars. It's not coming home. We haven't had a success with bringing anything back from Mars. We've sent a lot of stuff there, but we haven't brought anything back from Mars yet. So this is really cool to be able to see. It's got a lot of questions about what materials it's made out of and what are the different parts. The gray part that's kind of down on the ground is a thing that is used to collect samples of rocks, and it can actually drill into the rock and take pictures of it. And that is a little bit better from the rovers that were sent before this one, which were Spirit and Opportunity. Those could only take pictures, but they couldn't drill down in, so they could only take pictures of the surface. This one could drill and take pictures of the surface. Now we have another rover on Mars, and that one can actually collect rocks, and it's collecting rocks and does a lot of like actual scientific experiments with the rocks and sends data. So it's like a little geologist, a robot geologist that's out there on Mars for working for us. As far as we know, there are no Martians on Mars. We haven't found any life on Mars yet, but it does communicate the information back to us on Earth. So we continue to look for life on Mars, but we haven't found any yet. We have found water, and we don't really know what's underneath the ground in Mars. So we'll keep looking. So far, no Martians. It has So anything that you send up into space has to, like, if you send something to Mars, it's driving around on Mars, it's its own like sort of robot, and it gets coded from the Earth. So we send up instructions to it, but it can also decide for itself what to do. So if it's going along and we've told it to go straight, but there's a big rock there in front of it and it can't go, it hits something, kind of rock or something, it is smart enough to know to steer around that and not just bonk into the rock and not be able to go any farther. So it's very amazing piece of engineering, and it has to have its own power source. So what do you think might be the power source that a robot on Mars could use? What would you use if you were going to send something out to space? So I have a few people that some people say solar power. Some people say nuclear power. Those are both great sources of power in space. A battery is a good source of power as well. But as we know, like for our phones and our devices, batteries work for a little while and then they run out of power. So the battery is definitely has battery, but you have to have something that then like powers up the battery again, or recharges the battery. This particular rover does use solar power, and that's it has a solar panel on it, but it also has nuclear power, and the new one also has nuclear power. Solar power panels are a great source of power on Mars because the sun does shine on Mars just like it shines on the Earth. So it's a great way, and the atmosphere on Mars is pretty good as far as allowing the sun to shine through. The only problem with solar power on Mars is that there's these big dust storms and the dust blows all around, and sometimes the solar panels get covered with dust, and then once the solar panels get covered with dust, there's no way to clean the solar panels off, and then they stop working. So there's a lot of things to think about when you're designing something like this that you have to think about. I like the fact, for me, I think that it kind of, like Wally, it kind of looks like a person. And I think it's like it has a head, with the camera, that's its like face or its eyes. It looks out and it's almost like the size of a person. So when it looks out, it takes pictures that gives us a view that's kind of like you're on the planet, and that's really neat to see. So it gives us this kind of view, and then it goes around. It can do a lot of things that I can't do, like go over terrain with all its wheels. And so this rover is still working on Mars. Even though we sent up another rover, it continues to work. And so that's super cool, like fun that and then we had previous rovers, like I said, the Curiosity is the well, we had Spirit and Opportunity, and before Spirit and Opportunity, we had Sojourner, which is a little rover, and it was kind of like just the first test to see, can we send something that can roll? And similarly, like now we send something up that is like a little drone helicopter to see, can something fly on Mars and what would that be like? So trying out different kinds of transportation to see how we can explore another planet, where we so far have not been able to send people. We hope to send people to Mars one day, but these robot explorers are a great way to help us to learn more about the planet. So this is something that is, I think, super intriguing to a lot of people. Do you have other, now I can't necessarily answer all your questions, but I'm wondering, does this, do you have other questions that, that this brought up that made you wonder, um, as you were thinking about something like this? So we thought about the power source. We thought a little bit about what the materials were that it's made out of. It's got to be made out of materials that are light enough to send to space, but also um, strong enough to withstand, roaming around um, on on the planet. I'd have to look up how heavy is the rover. I can Google it. I can look it up. But those are kinds of questions. So like how heavy it is like an answer, a question I can answer, and then questions like that you can like look up, and that's kind of like neat. But like what is um what are some ideas about powering, or why why does it need, everything needs power? Those are like questions that are more like investigating questions, like things that you can think about power and how we do different kinds of um power different kinds of things on Earth and on other planets. We have a question about, is the word robot the most current description of this mechanism? um it's a robot rover. So it does have robotic elements to it, and a robot is, something I think that is um that you can code and you can tell it what to do, and then it follows those directions. So that's like what this does. We have a lot of robotic spaceships and spacecraft out there that do lots of cool stuff for us. They're also pretty sophisticated because they can also, like I said, it follows the instructions that we give it, but also can a little bit make its own decisions just to override it and say, I don't think that's a good choice for me right now. So it's kind of cool to think about what's a robot and what isn't a robot. So these are like great questions and great ideas. So this is one way that we like to explore ideas about science and STEM, and thinking about like taking an image or at the actual object in the museum and just like exploring our questions about it and looking a little bit more closely at the object and thinking about the parts and all of the different aspects. And you can just think about all the different questions that you can begin to think about and what are the things that you wonder. So thank you so much for doing that with me. We do have a little series of close looking videos that kind of go through this idea at the Air and Space Museum. We have them we share them on YouTube, and they're sort of like models of how to do this, but also, you can just use the actual video to sort of slow down and take a look at a few different of our objects in our collection. So hopefully those are resources that you might be interested in trying out. So the next thing that we like to, another next strategy that I like to think about is using stories and narrative. So with young children, you know, giving info and I mean, honestly, with adults too, sometimes like giving information is great, like just like telling people information about something, but when you sort of like weave a story about something, and that can be a nonfiction story or it could be a fictional story, but either way, it kind of like it gives a little bit more of a context and allows a child to sort of see their own connections to that story. So what we're going to do now is we're going to watch a video of a story that we've created at our museum, and this story is Mission to Mars. So it relates a little bit to this topic and the image of the object that we looked at. And I'm gonna take a look at one of our stories that we wrote and then think a little bit together about um what we did in the story. What do you notice about what we did in ways that we are trying to cultivate a STEM mindset using that story? So hopefully you'll see some things that we did.
It's story time! Hi, I'm Anne from the National Air and Space Museum, and I'm here to bring some of our museum stories to you at home. At the National Air and Space Museum, we're very excited about plans to send people to Mars. We've never sent humans to Mars, but we have sent landers, like the Viking 1, which landed and stayed in one place, and also rovers that can move around on the planet to help us learn more about Mars. The first rover was Little Sojourner, and then we sent others. The Curiosity rover is much bigger and more complex. When scientists and engineers were building these landers and rovers, they built models that were just like the real ones that they could take out to the desert and test to see how well they might do in a place on Earth that's kind of like Mars. We have these testers in the museum for people to see. Now, there are plans to send humans to Mars, and one day, people like you could get on a rocket and go there. Here's a story about that. Once upon a time, there were 3 friends who liked adventures. They were Millie, Ruth, and Lou. One day, at one of their tea parties, Millie told the friends about the trip that she and her family took to the Air and Space Museum. There were rockets, and Mo and I climbed into a spaceship, and we learned all about astronauts and the new mission to Mars, said Millie. I'd like to go to space, exclaimed Ruth. We could be the first kids on Mars. We need astronaut suits, said Millie. And a rocket, said Lou. And snacks, said Ruth. I'll bring the cookies. That settled it. The friends were going to Mars. Each friend worked on a different part of the plan. Millie started designing the astronaut suits. We won't be able to breathe the air on Mars, and it's super cold. We're going to need helmets and gloves, she said. Lou focused on building the rocket. The rocket will need to be big so we all fit inside, and fast and powerful because Mars is so far away. She found a tall box and started making it into a rocket. Ruth pulled together snacks and games for the trip and also started to think about where they would live after they landed on Mars. I think a big dome would be good. I saw a video about making a dome using rolled up newspapers. Millie's brother Mo balanced on the fence and watched. Can you use scooters on Mars? He asked. The friends looked at each other. They knew that they would need to test out whether they could ride their scooters with the astronaut suits on. The next day, they came together to test the scooters while wearing their suits. They all wore their helmets, gloves, and boots. Millie had made an oxygen tank backpack out of plastic bottles, some string, and an old hose. They put on the backpacks and took off. It was a little awkward at first, getting used to all of the gear, but they got the hang of it. They scooted around a bit and then got back to work making their Mars mission materials. Then Mo came up, dragging a big blue tarp. Can you use this? He asked. Perfect, said Ruth. That can cover the dome. Lou said, the rocket is almost ready. I put on some powerful engines on the bottom that I made out of cardboard tubes, and I added tissue paper. Fire! One last thing, said Millie. We learned at the museum that every mission has a special badge with the names of the crew on it. Let's make our Mission to Mars badge. The 3 friends worked together to make badges, and then they taped them to their shirts. Now we are ready, said Millie. The next day was the launch. Mo waved goodbye as the friends climbed into the rocket that Lou had built and started the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off to Mars! They ate cookies and played a clapping game on the trip. Boom, chicka rocka, chicka boom. Boom, take a rocket to the moon. Boom, chicka rocka, chicka bars. Boom, take a rocket off to Mars. We've landed, said Lou. They put on their astronaut suits and stepped out of the rocket onto Mars. Wow, said Millie. It's dusty on Mars, and all of the rocks are orangey red. They climbed on their scooters and headed toward the dome that Ruth had made. Good idea to put the dome at the base of the big mountain, Ruth. Once we get some rest, we should climb to the top and see even more of Mars, said Lou. They climbed inside. The sun was shining through the blue tarp, making a spacey light. Ruth gave each friend a flashlight, and they shined them on the sides of the dome. Millie whispered, I'm so glad that I have such good friends to share adventures with. Me too, whispered Lou and Ruth, and they gave each other a high five. The end.
After each story time, we have a craft time, and I'm going to demonstrate that live. But hopefully you had some ideas of like some things that we try to do to cultivate a STEM mindset, and also to model how the children in the story have already have like a kind of a STEM mindset. Yeah.
Scissors and your crayons. Very easy. So what we're going to first do is we're going to draw this square on the paper bag, and
that's okay. No worries. It's not a program unless you have some technical glitch. So that was just continuing the story. The story video was just continuing. So yeah. So my colleague and I, Diane Kidd, she does the illustrations and we write the stories, and yeah, they're really, I love her illustrations. They really bring it to life. And the characters that we created are three girls, three friends who really love to do science things together, and they're Millie's little brother Mo. So little brother Mo comes in, and he always has like great ideas, and he contributes to them, but he's like he's younger than them, so they kind of help to keep him, they're very kind to him. They encourage him to come along with them sometimes. Sometimes he knows when to just let them go off to Mars without him. So it's a good we like to try to show that kind of collaborative. The kids are both collaborative and competitive sometimes, and in a great way. They're always kind of a little bit more knowledgeable about like space stuff than maybe most kids, but not more than like kind of like a kid who's really into space would be. And they each have their own ideas and their own contributions, and then a lot of times they work on something separately and put it together. So those are all sorts of some of the things that we do to sort of show that that idea. And then they're usually do a lot of making. So we encourage that idea of making things out of things that you might find at home, that you'd have around the house. So that kind of maker idea in a home environment. So they're putting those ideas that they have and testing them out and trying them out. And so hopefully you saw a lot of those different things in the story. Yeah, we have now over, I think, 80 videos. I think that's what I recently counted. And we have some music videos, and we have a pretty nice big collection of these stories that we share. And you can find those on the Learning Lab that we're going to share after this, and also on our YouTube channel. So yeah, we try to think about ways of, looking at some real world phenomena or stories, about like science that's actually happening out there. So something like exploring Mars and thinking about Mars, or it could be about just about like the changing seasons, and leaves or seeds. And then like model the ways that the young children are relating to science. And there's so many different ways, and like telling stories to each other, imagining going to space. Those are some things that kids love to do. And then demonstrating that scientific thinking, like, oh, we better test that out. We don't know. Can we use our scooters on Mars? I'm not sure we'll be able to go out there with those helmets on. They might be a little too bulky. Or making models, as you said, like, how could I make a model of that rover using Legos? Like, how can we make a model of a rocket, or something that we could live on Mars, that we could build? Um, and then one of the really important aspects that we really like to promote with our stories is collaborating. So this idea of collaboration being one of, I think, one of the most important things about STEM mindset, that nothing is done with just one person. Everything um, is a collaboration. And even, ideas build on each other. And, there's just this idea that you can, when you build each other's ideas, that's where the real magic happens, and, well, where the science happens, actually. So hopefully you saw some of those things in the story, and you enjoyed it as well. So our last kind of strategy, which we did include a little bit in the story, is imaginative play. And imaginative play for young children is a place where they really can um, test out their ideas. When they're working on an idea, imaginative play is where you can really see, can understand, as if you play along with children, and you go along with them and listen to them as they're playing, you can understand a little bit more about what are they thinking, because sometimes they can't tell you what they're thinking, but through their play they'll kind of tell you. So it's, I think, a great way to kind of get into the mind of a young child and see, like, oh, what is their theory, that they'll tell you through that. So of course we had to think about making an astronaut helmet as the thing that we would do as an imaginative play idea. So this is where we hope that you'll play along with us today, and maybe brought a paper bag, such as this one, uh, and or a box. This box came today in the mail. Well, we got Girl Scout cookies, so it came just in time for me to make a helmet. I can show you both of those ideas. So the paper bag is a little bit easier than the box, because just the box is just hard to cut. But so what I like to do with my paper bag is I like to first draw on the paper bag, like, what do I think, make a plan for it. So I'm thinking about the helmet, and I'm thinking, okay, now, a helmet, I'm gonna need to be able to see out of my helmet. And if I put this paper bag on my head, I'm not gonna be able to see out. So the first thing I need to do is cut the hole so that I'll be able to see out of the helmet. So I might like think about, like, what shape do I want that hole to be? And a lot of times when you look at helmets, the holes are kind of round, like a face. And my bag is kind of square, but I think I could draw a round shape, or you could do a square shape with, like, round it off a little bit. Either one of those. So I'm going to draw a big round circle, and that's going to be so that my face can come out. So I'll cut that out. And then while it's flat, I might also like to think about, okay, so what are some things that my helmet would be really good for me to have on my helmet? Like, I want to have maybe some lights at the top, because it might be dark out there. And then I definitely like to have a camera, right? Because I don't want to have to like take pictures. So if I have a camera on the top of my helmet, then that's going to be so helpful to send pictures back to whoever is in the spacecraft or back on Earth, like listening to me. So I think I'm going to put a camera up on one side, and maybe I'll put lights on both sides, or should I put the camera in the middle? So you kind of have to think about all those different parts and think about the different ways that you want to design your helmet. And so I might just get some pens and draw some of those different things on there. Now it might be a little easier to draw it before you cut it, but you can also keep adding on some more things after you cut it. So cutting out that hole right there, one thing like that's a little tricky. But what I do, like, it's got a little place already where it's folded. So I'm gonna just fold that like that and pinch it, and then just make a little cut. And that gets it started. And then I can go into where I made that little slice. And so see, I took my little finger out there. Oh, see? And then I can go in and then I can just cut out that hole. Right. All right. Have you made one of these before? Maybe you've made one before. Okay, you could do it a little bit more precisely than me too, but that's pretty good. That'll work. And then now, well, notice something. I'm gonna put this on my face. It's not really perfectly done yet, but we'll notice something that I noticed when I made it. Oh no. So what so one thing I could do is I can cut a little bit on the side of the paper bag, and then it'll go down a little farther onto my shoulders. So this is a pretty big bag, so you have to try it on, test it, see if it works, and then make some changes to it if it doesn't work. And that's part of having a STEM mindset, to test it, see if it works, try it again. All right, so now I cut out some holes so that it'll sit down a little farther on my shoulder. Oh, that's better, much better. All right. Now I'm ready to go to space. I just need to add a couple of things, maybe some little buttons. Maybe some little buttons on there, maybe a camera, some lights. Oh my gosh. This is my one that I made out of the box. What? I decided to cut I just took a piece of computer paper and I drew on the computer paper, and then I put it on the box, made it white, because those spacesuits that you go out into space are actually white colored. So that, oh yeah, that makes it like much more realistic, right? I really do look like I'm ready to go to space now. I got my lights. And so that when you put the box on too, it kind of echoes, so you feel like you're in space. So that's a fun project, and I think like I'm modeling for you again, like this idea of thinking through and having the kids think it through, like what are the parts that you think you'd like to put on your helmet, and what are the parts that you definitely need, like, oh, that helmet's got to have an attachment to to where the air is and a hose and stuff like that. So you can think about all of those ways that you can make it a little more realistic, and look at a picture of a real helmet, and that will help you to to think about what are all the different parts. That makes it more realistic. That makes it a lot more fun and science minded as well. Yeah, so I'm wondering if anybody has any questions or comments for me. I'd love to hear more about how you might put some of these ideas into practice in your own learning environment. If you please put that in the chat. And then also, like, if you have more ideas about things that you do to cultivate STEM mindset in in your learning environments, also put those in the chat right now. Because we love to hear from you. It's great when we hear that your ideas. So I love this idea about making the models um, and thinking about different ways to make models of the different things out of Legos or different materials, Play-Doh, somebody said. I'm very jealous of scuba diving in Belize and working with coral. I would love to do that. So I'm like, you can come to the Air and Space Museum and I'll, no, that's okay. Yeah. I love the marine environments. They're beautiful. We have a great question about how museums can accommodate students with vision impairment. Yeah, our museums are really very obviously very visual environments. We have been working a lot. We do, try to make things more accessible as far as like having some things, models that you can feel and touch. And so that there's like that element is available. But we also have been doing a lot of work with audio descriptions of things to help people so that they can, understand what is there with an audio description of objects that we have in the museum. And if anybody has ideas about other ways that we can be more accommodating to folks with vision impairments, we'd love to hear them. We're really always working on making our collections accessible to all of the public. So that's one of the things that we really do try to work on and hopefully are and continuing to be better about, because they are really, as we said, like very visual environments, and so that can be a little bit restrictive for some folks. I love the idea of working with silly poems and thinking about out of this world poems. And I have some favorite poems as well that about space. There's a few people that have written poems about space, so you can look those up, poetry books, and then think about them. We are look for on our website also like more information about the eclipse coming up in April. Obviously the museum is super excited anytime there's an astronomy event, we get super excited, and we are going to have some programming about the eclipse. And you might remember from the last eclipse, ways to safely observe the eclipse. But we'll have some more like fun activities and things that you can do. So definitely look for those coming up. Coming up soon.
I want to make sure that a really great question in the chat wasn't missed. If you hear a disembodied voice, this is me, Tess. I've been talking to you all in the chat. But the question from one of our attendees is, what is the range of ages you have done this activity with? How old can I go with my students with this activity?
That's a super great question. I think that generally, like I said, our programs are for kids up to 8 years old or second grade, but even older kids could really do like, especially especially if you did the box, like to think about, okay, how like this is then becomes kind of a model of a astronaut helmet, right? And so like, okay, well, if you're going to make an astronaut helmet and you were going to design an astronaut helmet, what parts would you want to put in it? And like looking at the rover, we looked at the rover and we thought about all the component parts and what, does the astronaut helmet need a power supply, or is it get power, like when you're in the astronaut suit, do you need your own power, or is it powered enough for long enough? What kinds of, that idea, like, where do you want to put the camera, and what kind of lights are you going to put on it, and do you want to have like a communication device, or like what kind of communication, so you could think about all those different aspects. And I think like a fourth grade student, a fifth grader, they could do a lot with this as well. So that's a great question.
And I wonder if more questions while they're coming in, if you would mind walking us through the collection. Okay, let me pull that up.
Yeah. So this is a picture of the Learning Lab collection, and all of the different activities that we had gone through are here on it. So you can see a first thing is that the full article from the NSTA about their position statement. And so that's kind of a good research background in case anybody's working with young children and they're saying, what did the folks say about that? And then a couple of the classroom activities. We have the pictures of the lander and the rovers in the learning lab, so you can get those pictures and do the same thing, look at them right on the screen or print them out if you want to. And then the videos where we're doing the same thing, landers. Let's look closely at landers and rovers. So then you'll see a different person, not me, and a slightly different approach to looking closely at these objects. So it's kind of fun to go along with that video and try it out. And then our story time video is on there too. So this very same story time that we have is there, plus me demonstrating on the video how to make the paper bag helmet. Video is a separate video. So we have story time videos that have a craft at the end, and we have craft time videos with just the craft if you want to just tune into some making activities that you can do. There's some great playlists of like I said, there's like I think 80 videos now, so like a playlist of all the looking closely videos that we have, a playlist of all the story times that we have, as well as we have a couple of music videos on there, and all playlists of all the craft time activities, so you can review all of those different ones and take a look. And then we have a few more resources, just some information if you want to learn more about these landers and rovers, and find out some of that information, like how heavy is it and what are the materials that's made out of. Those are great places to go and look and find out about those and what are the science that they actually have been able to do with them. And then lots more resources from the National Air and Space Museum are linked there as well. So if you want to like find out more about this, the resources that we have about all sorts of different things, and of course the recording of this, if you want to go back and say like, hey, there was a little part of that I wanted to review again, or if you want to share it with somebody else, it's all there for you to go back and see again.
We'll add that in within the next day or so. Great, thank you. So were there any other questions that came in that you wanted to address? Or anything else to say?
I don't know. I'd have to like go back and review because I'm
Yeah,
sure
I
there
don't see
are.
anything else either.
But I really wanted to say that I appreciate, wow, what a great group. You all like went along with us and had a lot of things to say. I really appreciate that so much. And I had a really good time. It was a really fun way to spend my afternoon with you today. So I really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anne. It was really wonderful. So much play today. So I appreciate your being here, and I thank you to Tess for being behind the scenes with all that information. And just a note that our next Cultivating Learning session will be on Monday, February 26th. We'll be joined by Maureen Leary, an educator at the National Postal Museum, and Rafael Lopez, who is an award-winning illustrator, artist, and muralist. And the topic will be about building community with murals. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Reach out to us at learninglab@si.edu if you'd like to contact us. I don't know, Anne, if you want to put your email in here, or we'll forward anything. If you want to reach out to Anne and it comes to us, we'll of course connect you. So thank you again, everyone, for coming, and have a great evening. Take care. Bye-bye.